And welcome back inside Brunch from 107.7. We had a rather disturbing situation happen on Thursday. You heard of Columbine? You know what's involved there? Well, we had a situation where in Chaguanas, students were planning to take out a teacher and a couple of students. The reason for that, as explained by the news media, is that they were retaliating. And I understand that some uniforms were passed out and gang members scaled the wall and got into the school compound. We could have been looking at a disaster of unbelievable proportions. A telephone call was made to the president of the Trinidad and Tobago United Teachers Association, TTUTA, and he went out. He happened to be on the compound at the time. Later on, he sat with the Minister of Education to relay to the public the gravity of this situation and what we were spared. A soldier played a part in that, but I will have my next guest explain exactly what happened. As I said, he was on the ground. The president of the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association, Mr. Devanand Sinanan, thank you so much for joining us this morning, sir. Let us see. I got you here. Good morning to you, sir. How are you?
Oh, fine, thank you. Good morning, Mr. Bishop. Good morning to your listeners.
It is the second time we have you here, and it would have been a very grave discussion had the intervention not taken place. Would you bring the public up with the facts, since you were there, one, and two, for those who have no idea that this took place? Explain to our listeners what happened in Chaguanas, please, the Chaguanas North Secondary School.
On Friday morning, I was called by the teachers and asked to visit the school because they've been having a number of issues related to student violence, student indiscipline. It stems back for more than a couple of months. In fact, into last term, they had some serious issues with scratch bombs, etc. Upon my arrival at the school on Friday morning, which would have been around 9 a.m., I realized that the school is being dismissed. And when I entered into the compound, I saw army personnel on the compound. And, of course, when I started to speak to the teachers and the school authorities, that's when I found out that apparently the school authorities found out that there was a plot for a shootout to take place in the school on that particular morning. Apparently, a male teacher on his way to school was intercepted by a student from one of the two gangs that exist in the area and informed that there is going to be a shootout. And the teacher in question, of course, upon arrival to school, alerted the security officers as well as the school authorities. The police was called in. And quite coincidentally, Defense Force officer happened to be on the compound to collect his son's report book. And of course, his colleagues were in the vehicle. And when the principal and the teachers realized what was going on, and of course the seriousness of such a report, they asked those Defense Force officers to assist them. And that they did. Of course, the teachers themselves were very, very frightened. The school authorities realized that it could have been a situation where you could have had bloodshed, you could have had lives being lost. It's the very first time I have come across a situation where you have that kind of threat, where, a shootout is actually about to take place in a school, and it seems as though teachers were being targeted, teachers who apparently pursuing students in terms of their misconduct, their misbehavior, their violent behavior, etc. The problem, of course, is external to the school. The root of the problem is external to the school. It's the catchment area from which the students come, that enterprise area. There are two gangs. I think it's no secret that there are two rival gangs operating in that area. And, of course, many of the students are members of the gangs, so that the two rival gangs would have been able to recruit many students. The teachers have complained that there's drug use and drug abuse and peddling of drugs in the school. The teachers have indicated to me that firearms have been brought into the school compound in the past. So the gang rivalry has now infiltrated into the school compound. It's a fairly large school, or I think between 800 and 900 students, approximately 100 teachers. It was one of the biggest senior comprehensive schools in the country, a lot of buildings. What the teachers are very peeved about is the fact that a year ago, the security complement of the school was reduced by half. So instead of 8 security officers, they now have 3, 1 corporal and 3 constables. In addition to that, the second school safety officer was removed last term, and there has not been any replacement. So the school authorities are really trying to, grapple with a very, very grave situation, and they feel as though they're not getting the level of cooperation and support from the Ministry of Education and from other agencies of the state, and really the police, because the principal lamented to me several occasions where she would have called the police, and the police who did not respond or would have been very tardy in their response.
Now, this is the area. Devanand Sinanan, the president of the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association, is my guest on Brunch this morning. That is the voice you're hearing. And that is what is really disturbing to me from two fronts. One is that this is nothing new. It has been going on for a long time. Calls have been made repeatedly, and there's been no response. I think manifesting that frustration and what has been going on here is the fact that the soldiers who were asked to stayed there for about an hour before the police actually arrived. Is that correct?
Well, the police, I got there at about 9 o'clock. I understand the call was made to the Chaguanas police station minutes past 8, and I left that compound at about 10:30, and up to that point in time, no police had arrived on the scene. The Defense Force personnel, they stayed on the scene until, a sense of order was restored to the school, that the school could have been properly dismissed in an orderly manner, and then they left. Up to the point in time that I left the school, no police officers had arrived on the scene. And again, that is the lament of the school authorities. In fact, last week, Monday, when a student was attacked in the toilet, again, stemming from the gang rivalry, a young man, in his attempt to escape a gang of boys, he locked himself in one of the cubicles in the washrooms, and the other students, they climbed over and they slammed a steel chair on his head. His head got a serious. He had to be taken by the school authorities to the Chaguanas Health Facility for medical treatment. And then the principal was able to identify 2 of the perpetrators, took them down to the police station, and was warned by the police that she should desist from such a practice.
This is, she was warned, there's so many troubling parts about this. In the first place, I want to go into the area. How many students, from what you have gathered, were involved in this? 1, and 2, I know you were right at the same table with the Minister of Education in discussing this situation. So the issue of the response of the police in that area must have been discussed. What sort of explanation have you received from the police in the area? 1, as to why they are not responding to these calls, and 2, why it took them so long up till the time you left there before they could respond to what could have been a very, very, very tragic incident.
Well, first of all, Mr. Bishop, let me say that in my own experience, I have not had that kind of response from the police. I have worked in several schools in South, and normally when we call the police, they're usually very prompt in responding. In fact, they come sometimes to schools without even being invited. They would drop in and say, "Hey, principal, Mr. Vice Principal, is everything okay? How are things going, etc." Sometimes if you feel that, there's some kind of activity to take place after school, some kind of fight brewing, normally as teachers, you would pick up the intelligence, and you would call the police and say, officers, can you all please patrol, outside the gate at about 2:30, and they will. I have not had that kind of experience with the police, at least in the region that I would have worked in, Point Fortin, Pinal, Barpo, now Palo Seco. When I got there and I realized I was apprised of the situation, I immediately got on the phone and contacted Minister Garcia. He answered the phone, and I apprised him as to what was going on. He indicated to me that he had a meeting with the Prime Minister, who had just returned from Belize, I think, and was supposed to have a briefing with the Prime Minister. But he did invite me to come to his office immediately after I left the school and speak to him before he would have had to go off to Parliament on Friday, which I did. And I got an audience with both him and Dr. Francis, the other minister in the Ministry of Education. I did indicate to him my serious disappointment with what I was hearing, that I was very, very concerned that you have a school who is crying out for help from the police, and that help is not forthcoming. And that is something that seriously troubled me. And of course, he expressed the same sentiment. he immediately got on the phone and he spoke to Minister Dillon and indicated to Mr. Dillon, what our concerns were and what the reports were. And Minister Dillon has given him the assurance that he will definitely look into that matter.
We will be looking at that matter too, because even from your own statement earlier, and most folks who have had dealings with the police understand that they do in fact respond as soon as they can. You said you've had good experiences with them. There must be something wrong at that police station. Why is it for a year, if that is accurate, for a year plus folks have been complaining, teachers, and they're not getting responses to it. And in particular, this instance here, where they took that length of time, you got there after 9, you left there about 10:30, and then the police was not there. I mean, there has to be an explanation that we wait for. However, while we await that, I do want to ask you to explain one of the statements that was made, and I believe it was you that said the understanding is that the idea was to off a teacher. Quote, off a teacher and some of the students there. What did the teacher have to do with this, as best you understand it? What was the angst with the teacher that the teacher would be targeted here?
Well, this teacher is not just a teacher, he's a dean, and he's one of those who is not afraid of the students. He will actually walk through the school compound and will challenge them and will reprimand them as he sees fit in the performance of his duties as a teacher and as a dean. And he has been one of them who has been quote-unquote harassing those students. And I think it stemmed, I'm not absolutely sure, but I think it stemmed from the fact that one member of a gang was arrested by the security personnel located at the neighboring school for some transgression. I'm not too sure exactly what the offense was. Taken down to the police station and I think was charged. And somewhere along the line, there seemed to have been some kind of linkage. I'm not absolutely clear about the details, but that is what would have precipitated this kind of response. And again, going back to last week, Monday, with the problem between the two gangs, where one was seriously injured and had to be taken to hospital, and the way that the teacher in question would have treated with the issue, identifying perpetrators, etc. So this apparently was the genesis for that kind of response.
Allow me to be very clear. The voice that you're hearing is that of the president of TTUTA, Mr. Devanand Sinanan, took the time to be with us this morning. Truly appreciate it. About a year ago or so, you said security was reduced. And why was it reduced? Budgetary constraints? And if it was, after we had the evidence that this was not tenable, this was not sustainable, the fact of three people doing security in the school was untenable, what kind of response? Why was there no response? Did you inquire these things of the minister?
When the security complement at a number of secondary schools was reduced last year, we did complain, vociferously so, from a tutor perspective, that it would have been compromising the security, the safety of students and teachers at the various schools, knowing the level of violence and indiscipline that we're encountering in the society. Rather than beef up security complement at the school, you are reducing it. Our understanding is that it was done for economic reasons, and Chaguanas North Secondary was one of those schools where the security complement was not just reduced, but it was cut by half. And those teachers have been complaining bitterly about that state of affairs for the last year. And we have been making repeated representations to the authorities to no avail. However, we are thankful that Minister Garcia, understanding the gravity of the situation, has promised that he will definitely take all necessary steps to increase the security complement of the school. The recommendation for schools like Chaguanas North, what we deem high-risk schools, is usually 2 by 6, that is 2 corporals and 6 constables. We are talking MTS personnel here, not police officers, as well as 2 safety officers, a male and a female. The compound is a very large compound. It requires constant patrol. The teachers have complained that even though it's I think the brick wall is about 3 meters high and it's topped with a razor wire fence, so that still is not enough to prevent intruders from entering the compound.